Hello everyone, it's Precious Pioneer and welcome back to my YouTube channel, the channel where we talk about food and entrepreneurship and kind of just spreading kindness in between. If those kind of videos inspire you, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button below. That would really help to support me and the creation of these videos. But without further ado, we're going to continue the cookie home business series, and today we're going to be talking about some of the mistakes that I wish I would have known before I got started, and the most common mistakes that a lot of new entrepreneurs make. And so I'm going to kind of steer you in the right path and give you some tips, 5 tips that I wish I would have known to avoid some of the most common mistakes. Jumping into number 1, the most common mistake that I find is lack of research. I think it's incredibly important, especially when starting a food venture, to test out your recipe over and over and over again till you have it perfected and you can write it down without guessing, because it's going to come in really crucial when you're managing your inventory and keeping track of food costs. Also, researching your customer and your clients is really, really important. Some notes that I kind of mistaked when I started my cookie company. I claimed that my cookies were vegan. However, I didn't know that honey was a problem for a lot of vegans until I went and tried to sell my cookies into a vegan restaurant. And they're like, actually, can you trade out the honey for some coconut nectar or agave or some other sweetener? Because we actually do not eat honey. And I did not know that. So I did not do enough research on the vegan demographic and what qualifies and what doesn't qualify. So it's really important to do sufficient amount of research, whether that's your cost, whether that's what flavors are popular locally. Sorry, you can hear my neighbors. And any other sort of customer discovery is absolutely essential. Your market, your target market, all these other things when you're starting and launching a business. Just jumping in and creating a product is really great, but you need some backing. You need to make sure that there's even a market out there who wants to buy your product, because you can start a business all you'd like and you can have a product, but if you don't have any sales and you're not generating any revenue, then you kind of just have a hobby. You're giving out things for free and you're investing your time and your energy, but you're not getting any return. So it's really, really, really important to make sure that you're doing a sufficient amount of research to make sure that everything goes over smoothly, make sure you're following all the rules and regulations and just checking all the boxes, because you don't want to miss any steps and put all your time, energy, money into something and realize that there's no return on any of it. So I think that's a really important mistake to avoid for number 1. Mistake number 2 is buying more than you need to get started. A lot of people, when they start a business, they think that they need a fancy logo design, a really expensive website, a fancy oven, new mixers, all this other stuff. So it's important to just start with what you have, because that will give you extra monetary resources that you could use when you're testing your recipe, when you're experimenting. There will be occasions where you burn a batch by accident and you forgot to set the timer, and that's all going to be scratched, and so you need the extra financial backing to make sure that you can replace it. There's gonna be times where your packaging falls on the floor or gets wet or something happens to it. You need a rainy day fund. But if you invest all of it into all the fancy things to elevate your business in the beginning, when you don't really have a market yet or fans yet, I think that's a really big mistake. I don't think that you need to invest so heavily on your marketing right away. You need to really focus on what you're really good at, because when you're starting off a business, you may have a product and you sell it, and then someone's like, hey, maybe you should make these alterations and things like that, and you adjust over the next couple of months after your launch, and then you pivot and you grow and you learn, and then once you're have that fine-tuned and you're like, okay, this sells really well, this sells really well, this is my most popular product and I'm selling it a lot during this holiday or whatever. Once you have all your data, then you know where to target all of your funding. So if you want to spend money on marketing, on a fancy website, on launching at a farmer's market, or all these different things, you know exactly what you're expecting. So I think the biggest mistake number 2 is putting so much money into the glitz and the glam when you don't really have a fine tuning of what your company stands for and your best products yet. Once you figure that out, then build your website, design a fancy logo, do whatever you need to do. But the very first thing you need to do when you start a business is to make something, sell something. Whether that's one cookie that you're really good at, like if you make a really, really, really good chocolate chip cookie or something like that, then your job is to figure out how to sell it. And then if you have a problem selling it, then you need to figure out that friction to be able to master it and sell it, and then spend the money on the fancy packaging or whatever it may be. But jumping in and starting it at the very beginning and spending so much money, I think is a huge mistake, because you could use that money to fix the friction, oh, your cookies are too dry, oh, they crumble in their packaging, oh, you can fine tune those things that make your business stand out. And I think that's really what you should focus on when you're starting out. Okay, jumping into mistake to avoid for number 3 is actually growing too quickly. Usually when you start off a business, you are one person, and so it's so tempting to be a part of the wholesale market, the farmers market, opening up a food truck, selling online, doing catering orders, shipping, and doing all these other things. But keep in mind, you have to do all of the work. And so when you're first starting out, stick to one source of export. So whether that's a subscription service, whether that's showing up for farmers markets, whether that's selling online, whether that's home delivery, or whatever it is that is your niche and what you really want to do, whether that's Etsy or something like that, focus on that one thing first. Master that thing first. When you have too many hands dipped and you don't even know what your focus is, then you kind of lose track. And the biggest thing when you're starting out is that you're different from everybody else in the sense that you make an original product. But if you're selling a cookie, at the end of the day, cookies can be made by anybody. And so you want to deliver the highest service, the highest quality. And when you have your hands dipped in all these different areas, your quality goes down because you are one person and you get spread too thin. So trying to grow too quickly and trying to do too much at once will slow you down and lower your quality. And one of the biggest things when you're starting out is you need to focus on the reaction that you get to that one service you're already doing, whether that's a subscription model and you notice that your checkout process on your website's a little difficult to navigate, a little confusing. You notice that your analytics say that a lot of people add things to their cart, but they don't actually buy anything. There seems to be a little problem there. You need to be looking at those fine-tuned things. You need to be able to look at your monetary tracking in the month and see if you're actually making a profit or breaking even, and seeing what you can do better, or you're seeing that your marketing brings people to your Instagram page but they're not buying anything. You need to figure out all those nooks and crannies to fine tune your business, not really dipping too many hands in all these different things, because then it's hard to focus on where the problems lie and where your money is and where your product is going, and and it lowers your quality. And when you lower your quality, you're replaceable. And that's really sad to say, but people really like a really great frictionless experience. And so if you can niche down and find your market that you deliver really well, you give great customer service, you write little handwritten notes or something, they want a little bit of novelty. And when you do the absolute most in the beginning, then especially when you're so new and you're prone to make a lot of mistakes, then people are a little bit less forgiving, because you're portraying yourself as a huge company, and so they expect professional efficiency, and if you can't hold up to that bar, then it becomes very challenging on you. And so I think that's a very important mistake to avoid when you're first starting out. Moving on to number 4 of mistakes to avoid when starting your business is not pricing your product correctly or accurately. I think this is one of the biggest problems. It's like when little kids sell lemonade and things like that. I think the conception is that, I'm just going to bake cookies and they're so cute and let me just sell them for $1 each, and I'm selling so many, so that must be so good. But not understanding the food cost analysis of how much everything costs, your time, energy, and resources, factoring all of that in, it's going to be really disappointing when you're not seeing a return on your investment and you're not getting any profit. So it's so important to pay attention to the nitty-gritty. But the cool thing about it is that once you do it once, that's really all you have to do, unless you change over ingredients and things like that. It is very time consuming when you first start, but it is so worth it, because you need to see how much money you're actually making. So you need to make sure that your cost analysis is accurate. So if you sell a cookie for $1, but a cookie cost that you make with all your ingredients, your flour, egg, sugar, baking soda, all of those ingredients actually cost you $2 to make, and you're not including your labor and resources, like the heat that it takes to heat up your oven, and then also your time and energy, and then also the third component is your profit. Then like that goes towards your website and goes back into the business and all these other things. Then there's a problem. You're just giving away free food at this point, because you're charging half of what it costs to make, and then you're just putting a lot of your time, love, and energy into it, but you're not getting anything in return. So it's so important to break down all of those food analysis things and be able to understand how you should accurately charge how much you should actually charge for your baked goods. Usually the cost of labor and resources is 30%. So I'm going to do a financial cost analysis video, because it's kind of complicated to explain, but the gist is you're going to list out all of your ingredients. You're going to divide it by how many batches you can make with each of those things. And then you're going to divide it by, once you get that number, you're going to add it all up, and that's the cost of how much it takes to bake that baked good. And you did it by batches, so how many batches it is, you're going to divide it by that number, and then you're going to divide it by 30, because that 0.30, sorry, because that's your 30% that you need to do for your labor, and then that's going to be your final total of how much it physically costs to make that product. But you want a little profit, so you're going to add a couple cents or whatever, and then that's how it's going to work. Jumping into the last tip number 5, I kind of touched on this in some of the other tips, but basically it's managing your inventory. There's nothing more important, especially when you're starting a food venture, is to keep track of everything that you buy, keep track of your costs, and making sure that you have enough money saved for mistakes, because there are going to be occasions where you drop 2 cups of flour by accident, spilled off the counter, or you accidentally burn a batch like I said before, or I don't know, mistakes happen. You forgot things in the oven, butter melted on the counter, an egg fell on the floor, rolled and fell on the floor, all these different things, but you need to keep track of all of it, because when you look at when you get to the end of the month and you look at how much you spent, and like you had to replace that flour, you had to replace that egg, and you had to replace that batch of cookies or whatever it may be, you're going to be in the negative. You're going to try to figure out what went wrong and why am I spending so much money on X, Y, and Z, and you want to make sure that you're tracking all of your waste, making sure you're tracking all of your waste, all of your production, how much you actually sold, how much you wasted, and then also things you had to replace and buy, so you know how much to buy for the following month. Because if you buy too much of one thing and then it expires and you have to throw it all away, that's one of the biggest downfalls of food businesses, as they go out of business because they're not keeping track of their perishability costs. Food expires, and that's really sad. Like if you don't sell enough cookies after a week or two, you have to throw away all of your eggs and all of these perishable ingredients that you have. So it's really, really important to keep track of all of it. Only order what you need because it does expire. Only make enough batches for the event or the catering thing that you're going to. Make batches to order. Cookies are very difficult to sell in the sense that you make them in batches. You can't really make cookies individually, or else it alters, the chemical structure, and won't taste the same. It won't be as high quality as if you made it in a batch of 12, or I guess the lowest is like 6 or something like that. So it's really important when you're like, what if you only sell 8 of those 12 cookies? All those cookies going to waste. You have to account for all of that and as inventory lost. And so you have to figure out ways to buffer that to be able to make sure that you're selling all that you make. And I think that's such an important kind of mistake to avoid, is just to keep track of that, to think that it's like I'm going to throw this away or whatever. Maybe that's where you lose money. We call it nickel and diming in the restaurant industry. We have these like special spatulas. It's important to, like, when you're using a bowl or something like that, or a cookie scoop or all these different things, to use one of those those rubber spatulas that kind of clean the bowl really nicely, to make sure that you're using absolutely everything and you don't waste anything. And use it to the best of your ability, because these are your resources, this is your inventory, and if you're weighing it based on the pricing, if you're weighing and measuring everything, like, it makes a big deal when you're losing a couple of eggs, or you're dropped half a cup of vanilla or whatever, because it adds up quickly, and cookies are such on the cheaper end of products that it really does matter how much you lose, And so that's what I hope you learned something new today. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any more follow-up questions for me or videos that you want to see in this cookie series, please leave a comment below. I usually comment and respond to your comments, answers to your questions, and if not, then I'll tell you that a future video is coming out, because sometimes it requires a little bit more in-depth conversation. But I really hope you enjoy these videos. Please share them with your friends or subscribe. That would really help just support the video in general, and help more people see it and help them as well. But without further ado, thank you so much, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.